Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that, of course, I would talk about the most recent subject at hand in that of the boxing world. And overall, I thought that this would be important to talk about because Mr. Mikey Garcia, of course, for those of you that don't remember who that was, or for those of you that maybe did not have the pleasure of watching him, maybe if you did not grow up watching sports, or maybe if you did not watch that much of boxing, and that of the early 2010s to the latter part of the 2010s, Mr. Mikey Garcia, in my view, was clearly one of the better and more skilled and even greater, if you want to go there, boxers of the 2010s. Unfortunately for Mr. Mikey Garcia, I don't think that his career has transcended quite to the point to where maybe he once originally planned. But if we're really going to be real about Mr. Mikey Garcia, and if you overall have been around my channel probably for the past year and a half, you know that this is not really that much of surprising news to me. In fact, the videos that I have done about Mikey Garcia, I predicted that either A, that he was going to try to go for the Manny Pacquiao fight, which he did try to go for, but Manny Pacquiao did not seem interested enough in that fight. He went after Yordenis Ugas, of course, and then did end up retiring after he ended up losing that fight, I believe by unanimous decision. Or B, he was going to retire. And of course, after Mikey Garcia, in his last fight against a complete no name of a fighter, at least a fighter that we did not think was going to be anywhere near on the same level, a Spaniard fighter by the name of Sandor Martin, who pretty much embarrassed Mikey Garcia, in my view, in that fight, at least according to his regular standards. I think Mikey Garcia pretty much took a look at himself and said, you know what, before I possibly embarrass myself or overall ruin my legacy any further, I really don't have the same fighter that I once did. And really, if we're going to be real about Mikey Garcia, I'm not quite sure if he was ever as 100% interested in boxing as overall maybe what some of his other family members have been. Mikey Garcia, the way that he talked and the way that he always looked and the way that he always said things in interviews, he almost came across as that one guy that really overall was just in charge of the family business, or really overall was just in it overall because it's his history. Mikey Garcia really to me never really seemed overtly interesting in his boxing career, at least overall as much as some others. I don't think that Mikey Garcia really has had the fire in his belly for the past several years. I think that it's been like that after the Errol Spence loss. I think it was like that before the Errol Spence loss. And I think that's why for such a long time, Mikey Garcia was trying to get that Manny Pacquiao fight. Because usually people, especially people who may be coming off of a loss, or people who took a big ass whooping not too long ago, or a loss against a high contender, and then they try to get that fight against Manny Pacquiao, you notice that some of these guys, they end up retiring after that fight. People overall, like a Sean Porter after the Terrence Bud Crawford fight, he was trying to get the Manny Pacquiao fight before he ended up getting the Terrence Bud Crawford fight. Because I think there may have been a possibility that Sean Porter knew that Terrence Crawford was going to beat him. And a certain amount of these fighters, they take a look at it and they say, well, if I'm going to get my ass kicked, or overall, if I am going to lose, not only am I going to get my ass kicked to one of the greatest boxers of all time in Manny Pacquiao, but I'm also going to get a huge payout. And I think that's basically what Mikey Garcia was looking for. Because Mikey Garcia, he really has not fought a lot of the other top contenders within his career. And it's very important to distinguish someone that certain people call a cherry picker just because overall, for the sake of narrative, someone like a Canelo Alvarez, or someone like a Terrence Bud Crawford, or someone like, say, a Floyd Mayweather Jr., which a lot of people, of course, they don't like because they're on a very high level. Of course, the videos that I have reviewed when it comes down to it, from Dante's Boxing Nation or Boxing Ego, which is the channel that we're going to review today, Boxing Ego, they mainly have alleged that Canelo does all these, snake-like moves and basically fights people at their worst. Canelo Alvarez, he gets the same treatment overall from certain fans as what Floyd Mayweather Jr. did overall, at least just by certain demographics. And the reason why that is because he's on the all-time great level, and people know who's on the all-time great level. The reason why Mikey Garcia was never reprimanded, or the reason why he overall was never bashed the same way like a Vasily Lomachenko or a Canelo was, or a Floyd Mayweather Jr. was, is because he never was really looked at on that level. Because even though Mikey Garcia, even though he is a very highly skilled fighter at his best, there were so many big fights, in my view, that Mikey Garcia really left on the table. He did not fight a prime Yuriorkis Gamboa, that could have been the big fight for Yuriorkis Gamboa's career and Mikey Garcia's career before Yuriorkis Gamboa ended up losing to that of a Terrence Bud Crawford. Mikey Garcia also was not interested in fighting that of a Vasily Lomachenko. Once again, you have to know the difference between someone that is an actual cherry picker or someone all in all that is not interested in facing a lot of the top contenders and someone all in all that maybe overall just has not fought a couple of the top contenders, but all in all usually does put up very decent results against A-grade fighters or decent level competition. If we were going to compare Mikey Garcia and Canelo Alvarez's resume, it really would not even be within the same universe. I'm really not even sure if it would be within the same solar system. It just is what it is. And some people may think that I'm going a little bit too far with that. I don't think I'm going that far with it at all. When you take a look at Canelo Alvarez, there's so many top contenders that he ended up fighting. You take a look at Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, all decent A-grade champions when he fought them. Undefeated, sometimes multiple weight division champions. You're also talking about Danny Jacobs, who was an A-grade fighter when he fought him. Austin Trout, Arasani Lara, Gennady Golovkin, Sergey Kovalev, and there might, Miguel Cotto. There might even be a couple of others that I'm personally missing. Chavez Jr., if you even want to include him, even though I would not say that he was ever a great fighter. But at the end of the day, when you take a look at Mikey Garcia's resume, who does he really have on there? Real cherry pickers and real fighters that are not interested in the best of fights, you can tell overall by their resume. You also can usually tell by how other boxers think of them, at least at certain times. Because no one is ever going to put Mikey Garcia and Canelo Alvarez in the same sentence. It's just not going to happen. And the reason why that is because even for how skilled Mikey Garcia was, he never fought the big boys pretty much of any weight division. Now, he does have wins over champions. He was overall, the first one to defeat Jazan Satichening, that one dude from the Balkans, I believe. I believe that he was the third or the fourth one to defeat Adrian Broner. I believe the third. He also overall ended up defeating Orlando Salido. He ended up defeating, I believe, a couple of other ones, Roman, Rocky Martinez, and there might be a couple of other fighters, Jesse Vargas. He is a four-weight division champion, a legitimate four-weight division champion. So I give Mikey Garcia that much credit. But I think that history will remember Mikey Garcia, or they should remember him, as the person who actually was not interested in some of the big fights. And that's why he was so interested in that Manny Pacquiao fight, because he knew that he basically was going to retire after that fight. He just wanted to get a buttload of money in that final fight. And this is what I was saying a year and a half ago about Mikey Garcia. So when people talk about Mikey Garcia, even though he was a very, very decent boxer, he can never be remembered, in my view. He may not even be remembered as one of the top 10 pound-for-pound best fighters of his generation, because how could he really be? I mean, if we're talking about fighters compared to him, he can't be on the Canelo Alvarez level. He can't be on the Terrence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. level. He can't be on the Alexander Usyk or Tyson Fury level. He can't even be, really, in my opinion, on the Vasily Lomachenko level. He cannot be on the Josh Taylor level. He can really not be overall on some of the other guys' level. I mean, what level could Mikey Garcia really be on if we're just going to argue resume? What really is the best win of Mikey Garcia's career? It would probably either be Orlando Salido or Adrian Broner. Maybe even Jesse Vargas. There is no debatable A-grade wins in Mikey Garcia's career, not one. And that's how you know the difference between a fighter that all in all was avoiding some of the big fights in his career, or the majority of the big fights in his career, versus someone that maybe just has not fought some of the other top contenders that you would just like that fighter to fight. Because Canelo, if we're going to talk about him or Mayweather, they fought so many A-grade top contenders. Whether you wanted them to fight them at that time or not, you still have to give those fighters credit for facing those fighters when they did. Mayweather still fought Miguel Cotto when he was a champion. Same thing with Canelo Alvarez. Mayweather fought Manny Pacquiao when he was a champion. He fought overall Robert Guerrero when he was a champion. He fought Oscar De La Hoya when he was still a champion. All right, Canelo Alvarez fought the majority of the biggest fights in his career when they were champions or when they were at decent points in their career. Mikey Garcia, the champions that he fought usually were B or C grade fighters. And after that loss against Sandor Martin, I think Mikey Garcia took a real look at himself and he said, you know what? I don't believe that I'm going to get the Manny Pacquiao fight. Let me overall quit while I'm ahead, and overall let my legacy be remembered for what it will be, and let me not damage my legacy any further. But anyways, we're going to talk about Mikey Garcia's career in this video. Mr. Boxing Ego is going to commentate, and I'm going to tune in. Should be very interesting, but let's get into it.
Did Errol Spence Jr. retire Mikey Garcia? Mikey Garcia, cryptic bio, announced his retirement.
Well, you can say in a way that Errol Spence Jr. somewhat retired Mikey Garcia, but you know what? I think that Mikey Garcia retired himself. And some people overall, they may disagree with that. It's almost kind of like Sean Porter against Terrence Bud Crawford. I think Sean Porter, he said, if I lose this fight, I'm pretty much done. And I think Mikey Garcia, he was even in a worse position than Sean Porter, because at least Sean Porter, he fought the majority of the big fights in his career, even though, of course, he lost the majority of them. But at the end of the day, Sean Porter at least stepped up to the plate. Mikey Garcia, a lot of the times, there were so many A-grade fights in my view that he could have fought that he did not even try to fight. He did not even want to face Jorge Linares when he was at the top of the 135-pound division. Now, whether you believe that Mikey Garcia would have dismantled him, that's up to you. But a lot of people don't remember how dangerous Jorge Linares was at that point in time in his career. He was a very decently dangerous fighter. He had a very big revival, and the only one overall that fought him at the time was Mr. Vasily Lomachenko, and he ended up stopping him in a very tough competitive match, I believe within 10 rounds. Mikey Garcia did not seem interested in facing either of them.
Is it true? I don't know. Well, we're going to talk about that in this video. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Make sure you come in and smash the like button, Mikey Garcia, let's jump right into it. He put mysteriously and randomly, like he didn't announce anything, but on his bio, all of a sudden his bio says he's retired. And somebody picked up on this and noticed that his bio now said retire from boxing. And the rest is history. So,
once again, I predicted this a year and a half ago. And I am not a person that calls myself Nostradamus or anything like that. I'm far from it. That's not what I'm saying. But if you knew, and if you know how to read people decently well, if you know how to read into certain machinations and people's motivations and narratives, which I usually do quite well, at least in my view, you could see this coming from a mile away. Mikey Garcia, once again, he wanted that last Manny Pacquiao fight to get that huge payday. Possibly maybe become a 5-weight division champion. It was a win-win situation for him, but he did not want the Vasily Lomachenko fights. He did not want the Josh Taylor, Regis Prograis, overall Gervonta Tank Davis fights. He did not want them. Okay, he did not want them.
I don't know. This could be a joke.
And once again, when you take a look at Mikey Garcia and the way that he was talking in interviews, Mikey Garcia really overall has not been interested enough in boxing to really become one of the top 5 pound-per-pound fighters anyway. Every single time that you hear him talk about boxing, he does not sound anywhere near as motivated as what I hear some of the other top echelon athletes within the sport.
The real deal. I haven't heard like an actual interview from Mikey. And in the age of social media, you typically want to hear from the source. But this is his verified page. So I'm going to take it with a grain of salt, but it looks to be true. And it's also been very quiet on the Western Front for Mikey Garcia. He's coming off a loss to an unknown dude, and that might have been it. That might have been murder, she wrote. Because if you're losing to a guy like Sandoval or Sandals or whatever his name is, people are going to question you at the elite level like this. And maybe I can't speak for Mikey Garcia, but I'm just saying if Mikey knocked out Dejan's Latishanin, beat Adrian Broner, and went 12 with Errol Spence and stuff like that, but then you're losing to some unknown guy from Spain like Sandals, that could have been maybe a breaking point and a reality.
Well, at least Mr. Boxing Ego understands the point, or at least will admit the point of certain fighters when they're at a worse or better position in their career. Because oftentimes what these guys in new media especially try to do, especially when they talk about a Vasily Lomachenko or Canelo Alvarez, they try to act like they're the same fighter as what they were several years ago. So apparently Terrence Crawford, Errol Spence, and Deontay Wilder, they're the only fighters apparently improving, but Vasily Lomachenko and Canelo Alvarez, they're the same fighters from several years ago. Does that make any sense? When you're a top of the level line athlete, there's going to be moments in your career where you increase your skill set or where you're at your somewhat level of a peak. And there's going to be moments to where you're on your declination a little bit. And Mikey Garcia, even though he was somewhat in his prime years, I believe he was 32 years old. If I'm wrong about that, correct me. It's anywhere from 32 to 34, somewhere around there, which is still one of the peak points of your career. I think that he heavily underestimated him. I think that he was looking for one last payday. And pretty much overall, when Manny Pacquiao lost, not only when Manny Pacquiao lost, but when he lost as well, Mikey Garcia pretty much said that that was it.
Check that your heart might not be in it anymore. And we know Mikey Garcia has had a career.
I don't think Mikey Garcia's heart has ever really been 100% into boxing. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of athletes overall. Marvin Hagler, Mike Tyson, and maybe a few others that have even stated after a while that sometimes boxing that it can get a little bit tiring, and I get it because sometimes some of these athletes, the way that they train and the way overall, they have to deal with things, they have to almost eat shit and breathe this sport. It almost has to be their complete life. But Mikey Garcia has never. I don't think that his heart has ever really been 100% into boxing. I just always thought that he was highly skilled and highly gifted. He's almost like a person to where I really don't even know how to compare it. It's almost like one of those movies you watch to where you have a person that is highly, highly gifted in an area, but they really overall don't want to do that. It's almost like someone who's very talented in football, but overall they always wanted to be like a ballet dancer or something. I don't know a better comparison than that, but I think you get the point.
Where he was absent from the sport of boxing, dealing with a legal battle with Bob Arum's Top Rank, and this lasted like 3 years or so, and he was out of the ring. So that kind of depleted and took a lot out of his career because if you remember, when he was with Top Rank, he was on top. He was undefeated. He beat Orlando Salido, and at the end of the day,
Let me also make another Canelo Alvarez and Mikey Garcia comparison. Because many of these guys, they always try to allege, and when I say these guys, I'm talking about the new media pro black fighters league. It just is what it is. Basically, they always try to allege that Canelo Alvarez, that he's moving up the weight divisions to avoid that of a Charlo or Andre or David Benavidez. And even though I would like to see those fights just as much as the next, you can't really 100% argue that Canelo Alvarez, that he's just 100% avoiding them, at least overall, and or at least make the point that he's facing guys that are nowhere near on their level. That just doesn't make any sense. When Canelo Alvarez fought at 154, he fought a multitude of undefeated fighters. He fought Austin Trout. He fought Araceli Lara, who in my opinion should have been undefeated because at that point he only had one loss in his career, which probably was the worst robbery that I've ever seen, against Paul the Truth Williams, I believe, or Paul Williams, whatever the hell his name was, when he was fighting. I believe that he also ended up defeating someone else there, I believe, or a couple of other people. But then when he went up to 160, not only did he defeat the very skilled and very talented refurbished Miguel Cotto, but he also ended up defeating the best 160-pounder in the world at that time, Gennady Golovkin. Cherry pickers do not move up another weight class and just fight the best fighter there in a fight that could be looked at as a 50-50 fight. What Mikey Garcia did when he fought Errol Spence Jr. was he went up two weight divisions to where basically almost no one had him in this fight winning. It was the same move that Akil Brook did over Gennady Golovkin. And the reason why Mikey Garcia did that, and I've seen this from the beginning, is the same reason why Akil Brook did that overall against Gennady Golovkin. The reason why that is, sometimes when you see a fighter that moves up two weight divisions out of nowhere and fights a fighter like an Errol Spence Jr., basically what that is them saying is basically that there is another fighter in my weight division that I believe could whoop my ass. And I need an insurance policy overall for my legacy to, if I do lose to that guy in my natural weight class, then I can have the excuse that I was never the same or I was too physically damaged, after the ass whooping that I took at two weight classes higher. Canelo Alvarez, that has never happened to him in his career. That has never happened. Every fight that Canelo Alvarez has been to where he has moved up, it's always been looked at as somewhat competitive, or if he wasn't the favorite, it was always looked at as a decently close matchup to begin with. When Mikey Garcia went up against Errol Spence Jr., it was a win-win situation. Because if he won, he was on top of the world. If he lost, there was many people that would just give him the excuse, oh, it's okay, you were clearly the smaller man. But what happens if you lose to a Vasily Lomachenko? What happens if you lose to a Gervonta Tank Davis? What happens if you lose to a prime Yuriorkis Gamboa? There's no excuse. So it just is what it is. And I like Mikey as a fighter, but he was on that bullshit for the majority of his career. He was scared to death of Yuriorkis Gamboa. He didn't want to fight him back in the day. And he was even more scared of Vasily Lomachenko. because as soon as Vasily Lomachenko went up to 135, all of a sudden that's when he made that move out of nowhere to go up to 147. And it's no problem if you want to move up to 140 for one fight to become a champion there. But then you should have fought Vasily Lomachenko. The difference is when it comes to Canelo, Demetrius Andrade, and what the hell is his name? Jamal Charlo, and even David Benavidez. Those guys, there's other guys that you can argue out there that Canelo fought, especially in his last fight against Dimitri Bivol, that are really more threatening than those guys. There was no more of a bigger threat for Mikey Garcia in a 50-50 or 60-40 type of matchup than Vasily Lomachenko, and he never took it because he was never interested in it. But it's always funny because they always talk about Canelo apparently vacating belts, which he has a couple of times. But once again, I've never been on the narrative that Canelo, has just flat out avoided these fighters. I believe that Canelo has planned to fight them in the future. But I can tell the difference between a fighter that, in my view, is actually out somewhat of history, out for history, like a Canelo Alvarez, and Mikey Garcia, who clearly has different plans. Mikey Garcia, he was never truly trying to go out for history. He was always trying to hide behind history, alleged history, by facing these B and C grade fighters every time he would move up a weight division. Because every single time there was a decent threat in a natural weight class of his, he would always move up. Every single time. Whether it was Yuriorkis Gamboa or Vasily Lomachenko, he did it every single time. And that is the difference between a Canelo Alvarez and a Mikey Garcia.
He was doing well for him.
Because Canelo Alvarez, once again, he went from 154 to face Gennady Golovkin. He went from 160 to completely unify 168. Now, if you want to mention that he didn't face David Benavidez, listen, that's up to you. But Caleb Plant and, what the hell was his name? Billy Joe Saunders and Callum Smith, those all were decent A-grade champions. Now, if you want to say that David Benavidez is on another level, I could somewhat, agree with that. But at the end of the day, then after that, Canelo Alvarez went up to face Dimitri Bivol, and that was looked at as a 50-50 fight. Actually, people more than likely favored Canelo to win that fight. So Canelo's standards are not on the same level as a Mikey. Mikey was looking for a way out when he fought Errol Spence Jr. Canelo was not looking for a way out. Okay, that's how you know that their plans or their machinations, meaning their motivations, are different.
So, and then all of a sudden the Gamboa fight didn't happen, and next thing you know, there's a legal standoff, and
it didn't happen because Mikey Garcia didn't want it to happen. Anyway,
the courts, and he's unable to compete or resign or whatever happened with this situation. So he lost some precious years in the midst of it all. So that was definitely detrimental in his career. But speaking of detrimental, my personal opinion is when he was calling out Errol Spence Jr. way back when, and you guys could watch my old content and my old videos from that point, I didn't really approve of it. Like, not saying I can tell Mikey Garcia.
I didn't approve of it either. And the reason why I didn't approve of it is because I saw Mikey Garcia's bullshit straight from the beginning. Once again, if you're intelligent enough to realize people's machinations or what they're planning to do, it was very easy to see right through Mikey Garcia's bullshit. The only reason why he went up to 147, all of a sudden a two-weight class jump out of nowhere, was because there was that little Ukrainian dude, Vasily Lomachenko. He would rather get his ass whooped against a bigger man, which of course is more excusable, than of course against a guy that may even be potentially smaller or someone of his own same size. Because if we're just putting this hypothetically, if you get into a bar fight, overall, let's say you're at Buffalo Wild Wings or something, or overall at your favorite sports bar, if you end up getting into a tussle or a rumble, who would you rather be more embarrassed by, getting your ass beat overall by someone that is half your size, or getting your ass beat overall by someone that is twice your size? So that's the way that they look at it.
To do what I want him to do, or I'm his boss or his guardian, he could do whatever he wanted to do, and he did do what he wanted to do. But if you remember my videos and my content, I said I don't see this playing out well for Mikey Garcia. And this is not because I like Mikey Garcia, It goes without saying if you watch my channel. And I interviewed, he was actually...
I like Mikey Garcia as a fighter, but for whatever reason, I don't know why so many people did not call him out on his bullshit, because it was very clear what Mikey Garcia was doing. Once again, it's very hard to really trust with certain people alleging certain things about certain athletes or certain fighters, because there's always so much allegations from these bitch-ass over-emotional fanboys. about this fighter allegedly ducking this one and all this other bullshit. I've always said this, when you talk about a Canelo or when you talk about someone like a Floyd Mayweather Jr., those were not fighters that ducked at least constant competition. Now, were there maybe certain fights to where you can argue here and there that did not happen? Sure. But a fighter, once again, that, pretty much overall is not facing elite competition, you can basically see it within their resume. Take a look at Leo Santa Cruz's resume. Besides Carl Frampton, you ain't going to find another A-grade fighter on there. You ain't going to find another A-grade win on there. Take a look at Gervonta Tank Davis's career right now. Besides Leo Santa Cruz, and even that's a debatable A-grade win, what other A-grade fighters you going to find on there? You're not going to find any. That's why his last 3 fights, he's fought nothing but B and C class fighters. Fighters that have never even been legitimate champions. And I don't count interim or regular belts. I don't count that bullshit as legitimate belts. Sorry. It just is what it is. Those are not real belts. All right? You are not a real champion, in my opinion, unless you have one of the legitimate belts or unless you are one of the top 5, guys in that division at least. And none of those guys were. So it just is what it is. And another fighter that we have to take a look at is Mr. Mikey Garcia. Because Mikey Garcia, once again, and I've always brought up this point, when you take a look at his 40-fight career or his 42-fight career, however many damn fights he has in his career, what A-grade fighter, what A-grade win can you really debate that he has? He don't have any. He don't have any. A fighter that is actually looking to get some of the biggest fights out there, they're at least going to have one A-grade win or go through whoever they needed to go through throughout those weight divisions. And there was a few fights that Mikey Garcia could have taken in his career that he did not want to take. And he could have continued on with his career, but to be honest with you, I think that it was the best option for him to retire. Because I think Mikey Garcia pretty much knew that he did not have the same fire overall in his eye anymore, and I think he knew that his career was pretty much done.
One of the first people I interviewed when I got into boxing, and he was very humble, a lot of humility and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the stylistic matchup and moving to 147 and trying to fight, it was a tall order. And even his own trainer, brother.
It was a very tall order, and to most people, it was looked at as an impossible order, and that's the reason why he did it. Once again, when you take a look at an athlete, it's almost like the Aaron Rodgers situation. Aaron Rodgers fans, they always love to bitch, moan, and complain about how Aaron Rodgers, how he never has any help. And Aaron Rodgers, he also alludes to these excuses as well. He always kind of alleges and throws people under the bus and throws his, his GMs and his coaches and everyone else under the bus, kind of like LeBron James in the NBA. He always basically says he doesn't have enough help. But notice that Aaron Rodgers to this day still continues to sign the max with Green Bay. So what does that tell you about Aaron Rodgers? He never even truly believed that he was going to get a second Super Bowl. And that's why I keep saying Aaron Rodgers is never going to win another Super Bowl in his career because he knows he can't win another Super Bowl. And if we're really being real about Aaron Rodgers, not to digress too much, he was even lucky really to get that first one. But it just is what it is. And it's the same thing with Mikey Garcia. Mikey Garcia, so many people took a look at it and they said, wow, he fought Errol Spence Jr., that's great. No, it wasn't great. What it was an excuse to get out of a possible ass whooping at 135. That's what it was. All right? That's what it was. And there's a difference between someone overall moving up in weight, trying to be great, like what a Roy Jones Jr. did against, who the hell was that one dude? Puerto Rican dude, John Ruiz, at the heavyweight division. Or what Floyd Mayweather Jr. did when he fought Canelo or when he fought Cotto or some of the other guys, or some other fights that were actually looked at as competitive matchups. Even Sugar Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler, no one thought that this fight was going to be that competitive because overall Mikey Garcia, he really had no business being there in the first place. He should have fought Vasily Lomachenko or someone else overall at 140 at the more talented division. Notice also that he was never interested in facing Terrence Crawford when he was at 140 either.
Robert Garcia and his dad were against this. But Mikey, he's made a career. And not just Mikey, but fighters in general. I think fighters are stubborn and defiant by nature. So Mikey stuck to his guns and, wanted to do things his way, as has been the case before. And this time it didn't pay out. He thought maybe, I sparred with Pacquiao and Edwin Valero. They're big punchers, especially when he was working with them and he was young. So maybe he thought he could outbox Errol Spence or whatever. But it is looking to me like Errol Spence kind of retired Mikey Garcia. And I don't know.
Well, you can somewhat argue that, but to be quite honest with you, I think Mikey Garcia planned on retiring even years before the Errol Spence Jr. fight. I don't think Mikey Garcia has really been into boxing, at least fully motivated. I think once he lost to Sandor Martin, I think overall then maybe he maybe wanted a couple of possible fights to prove himself. But then I think he had a second thought about it and he said, you know what? I'm getting older. There's some very, very tough contenders out there. My heart is not in the sport necessarily, even as what it was, even just a few years ago. I should probably exit now.
Oh, the full story on Mikey, like what his decision was. But to me, that first loss seemed a bit hard for Mikey Garcia to embrace and take because he was undefeated and he was beating the Broners and stuff like that. And he beat Robert Easter Jr. It didn't look like.
Well, yeah, but what does that really say about your career? You beat the Broners, you beat the Robert Garcias. What is that? I mean, who really are those guys? I mean, don't get me wrong. You know, Robert Easter was he was an okay champion. He was never a great champion. B at best. Adrian Broner, we all know that he can't win any of his big fights. So it just is what it is. There's no offense against Mikey Garcia, but once again, can you point one definitive A grade win in his career? No. Just is what it is. Sorry. But you know, it's just the truth.
He was going to stop anytime soon. And then as soon as he reached that Errol Spence fight, Errol Spence beat him and dominated him. And although he lasted 12 rounds, I tell you guys all the time on my channel, sometimes going 12 rounds with a person like a Errol Spence Jr. or Deontay Wilder or Tank Davis is actually worse than being knocked out because, and I know it sounds crazy. I'm not saying because.
Well, I'm assuming you're putting Deontay Wilder in there because of his punching power. But usually fighters that have gone 12 rounds with Deontay Wilder, unless we're talking about that fat ass Bermain Stavern, or at least overall who have brought Deontay Wilder deep into the fight, they've actually usually gave Deontay Wilder a very tough time. And the reason why that is because even though Deontay Wilder is such a talented athlete, the basis of his skill set is just not there. He never really overall was an A-grade skilled fighter, but in terms of a physical talent, he had it in spades.
You got to understand,
But I certainly understand what he's saying because Errol Spence Jr. If you're talking about the Errol Spence Jr.'s or the Canelo Alvarez's or the even Vasily Lomachenko's, if we want to bring him into this, or the Errol Spence Jr.'s, any fighter that is on the A grade level and that also has decent athleticism and decent punching power and really knows how to use their skill set in a multifaceted of ways, they're going to punish you. And sometimes getting your ass beat over 12 rounds rather than getting knocked out is harder because then you may even have to fess up more to reality and basically say, wow, I couldn't make any adjustments over full capacity at 12 rounds.
In a society where people care what others think. So if they get knocked out, they're just looking at sheer embarrassment and people on Instagram are going to make fun of me. They're going to make memes about me, stuff like that. But I'm talking more scientific because if you got knocked out, you got knocked out. If you get dominated and beat, you got dominated and beat. They're both embarrassing. But we live in a society where people view kind of being knocked out as like the ultimate, ooh, he got knocked out. But it's really not. At the end of the day, your brain's not meant for blunt force trauma. So you get hit with the wrong shot or accumulation of shots, then it could be lights out for anybody. There's no one man above that or woman above that. So what I mean is sometimes when you get sustained punishment or a sustained beating and you get dominated, that takes more from you because think of it. When Pacquiao was fighting Marquez, that was in the blink of an eye in the fourth fight. Pacquiao was doing well. They both traded knockdowns. They both were doing pretty good in the fight. It was a competitive fight. Out of nowhere, Pacquiao, he sleep. You know, Marquez laid him out. But it was just like that. It was at the end of the last 10 seconds of the sixth round or whatever, and Marquez blasted him. So the fight's over. Roy Jones told you, he's not getting up, Jim. And he didn't get up. And it took a while for him to get up. Versus, you look at like Errol Spence versus Mikey Garcia, that could be more demoralizing when you're thought to be the technical, technician in boxing.
I would agree, and I certainly do agree with that point. When you're an undefeated fighter and you get your ass kicked over consecutive 12 rounds, and there was basically nothing that you could do to make the fight competitive, I do believe that that it did overall do something to Mikey Garcia's confidence at least a little bit. But in terms of Errol Spence purely retiring Mikey Garcia, you can maybe make an argument for it. But to be quite honest with you, not only do I believe that it was a mix of Errol Spence Jr., I believe that Mikey Garcia had planned on retiring even years before that fight. I just think all in all that he needed the perfect fight to go out on.
And you're fighting a bigger guy who's insanely strong, and he's bludgeoning you for rounds and blood. Your nose is bleeding, and you're losing the fight handily, and it's a sustained thing. So versus a knockout, you just bow, you got knocked out, it's over. You know, you're fighting somebody, and round 8 was bad for Mikey. Round 9 was bad for Mikey, right? And so on and so forth.
The whole entire damn fight was bad for Mikey. It's just, it is what it is. It was a major ass whooping. It was expected to be. And I think Mikey Garcia, he was hoping that Errol Spence maybe was going to be a little bit more stiff and not as good of a boxer as what he actually showed to be. But there was other plans as well to why Mikey Garcia took that fight and not other fights that he could have at 135 or 140.
It's like a sustained thing where you can't do very little. And to me, I think that was kind of a tipping point for Mikey Garcia's career, because did he really bounce back from that? Because he took like over a year off. He did an exhibition with Eric Morales. And then I think after that, he came back.
Well, Mikey Garcia, and sometimes there is no coming back from a loss that was that bad, especially if you are a decently talented and great fighter like that of Mikey Garcia, at least to a degree. But on top of that, Mikey Garcia's heart had really not been in the sport for a very decently long time. And he was not interested in a lot of the big fights. So that was really his escape from Vasily Lomachenko. And then after that, Errol Spence Jr. fight, all he really wanted to do was to possibly become a fifth weight division champion, to somewhat accomplish history. And he was hoping that he may possibly get that chance against Manny Pacquiao. But I believe once Manny Pacquiao lost and retired, not only that, but after he overall ended up losing to Sandor Martin, I don't think Mikey Garcia overall has any more interest in the sport. Now, some people may ask, well, why would it take this long? I think Mikey Garcia, all in all, I think he's been planning it for a very long time. I just didn't think overall, maybe he was thinking about possibly rematching Sandor Martin because he probably looks at Sandor Martin as a lower fighter than him. Maybe he was possibly thinking about rematching him. But I think the longer that Mikey Garcia thought about it, I think he said, you know what? Maybe it's not even worth risking it, because I don't think that I'm the same fighter anymore. And I don't think that I'm going to even perform at my best or at my optimal level.
He fought the Sandal dude. No, he fought Jesse Vargas. And then didn't stop Jesse Vargas, even though he badly hurt him. And Liam Smith just stopped Jesse Vargas. And then he had another long layoff. And then...
Well, Liam Smith did just stop Jesse Vargas. But Liam Smith also is a natural 154-pounder. So I'm not really going to compare that the same way. But I understand what you're saying. Plus, Jesse Vargas now has been through so many goddamn ass whoopings. So it just is what it is.
Came back and fought the Sandal dude in Fresno, where he was the hometown... Well, not hometown, but he was the favorite based on the demographic and the fans that were there. He was the bigger name and stuff. And then he got beat. So, I think it's a culmination of different things. And I know he was doing like the...
I agree with you. I think that it is a culmination of different things. I think it's partially Errol Spence Jr. I think it's partially Vasily Lomachenko. And I think it's also partially not getting the opportunity over Manny Pacquiao and Sandor Martin. I think it's a little bit of all of it. But anyway.
Police Academy and things like that. I don't know. I think some people are boxing because they can do it and feed their family. But I don't know if Mikey's passion was always there. And then I think...
I agree with you, sir. So basically a part of you sees the same thing that I say. I've said the same thing about Mikey Garcia for years.
When he met Errol Spence Jr. and, the fight played out like it's easy when you're winning versus when you're losing. Point blank, period.
I agree, especially if you're not motivated for the sport that you're in. Once again, some people are just doing things because they're very talented at it, but they don't really fully enjoy it. I'm trying to think of a movie overall that would be a great indicator of that or a great representation of that. But I just can't think of one at the moment, even though I'm a big movie buff myself. But anyway.
When you take an L, you got to reconsider, especially if your heart's not all the way in it, and you happen what happens in the Errol Spence fight. If that happens, I think that's really going to make you reconsider. So, best of luck to Mikey Garcia. If this is true, let me know what you guys think. Did Errol Spence Jr. play a part in Mikey Garcia's career now reportedly being over and him being retired? Drop that in the comment section. You dig?
Well, it certainly overall was a part of it, no doubt about it. But Mikey Garcia, in my view, his heart has not been in the sport for a very long time. And he was never really serious about taking any of the big fights in his natural weight classes anyway. So, even though Mikey Garcia does have to be remembered in my view, he is going to be a Hall of Famer. He is a legitimate four-weight division champion. In my view, at his best, he was a great fighter. He was a very talented fighter, but he did not take a lot of the bigger fights that, in my view, would have updated him or put him on the next level. In my view, he could never be remembered as a top five. He may not even be remembered as a top 10 pound per pound favorite for his generation. Because once again, if we're comparing him to Canelo, forget it, that's not even a comparison. If we're comparing him to Terrence Crawford, I don't think that can really be that much of a comparison. If we're comparing him overall to that of Errol Spence Jr., that's not a comparison. If we're comparing that to Tyson Fury, that's not a comparison. Alexander Usyk, in my opinion, has to be ahead of him. If we're talking about other fighters, you may even be able to possibly debate for the lower weight classes that a Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez could potentially be ahead of him. So it just is what it is. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thanks so much for watching. I do overall wish Mikey Garcia a great life afterwards. Once again, I don't wish anyone negative on boxing, but once again, Mikey, you really do have to understand certain motivations to understand what he was doing in his career. And the difference between someone like a Mikey Garcia and someone who actually takes a lot of decent fights, but a lot of people just try to tarnish because of the image like that of a Floyd Mayweather Jr. or that of a Canelo Alvarez. But anyway, but that's really about it for today. We'll see overall what Mr. Boxing Ego has to say, if anything left, and then that's pretty much it.
And I'm introducing.
So anyways, that's really about it. But thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.